Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Leslie Rogers, psychologist and host of Mental Health Talk. This March, I had an opportunity to meet with 4 amazing women. Gina Hawkins, Chief of Police, Fayetteville, North Carolina. Jennifer Rogers, founder and CEO of National Association of Women's Prison Reform, Rise Up Media Group, and Ruth Sanctuary. Jennifer Love, Chief Security Officer and Senior Vice President of Safety, Environment, and Health, Royal Caribbean Group, and C. Michelle Bryan, Deputy Director for Resource Management, Federal Protective Service. Due to technical difficulties, we were not able to air that segment during that time. However, I am now presenting to you their stories. Chief Gina Hawkins. So, Chief, I've tried so hard to find out exactly how many women police chiefs are there. I went to the Chief of Police Associations and I've done research and looked in media. But what I have found is although media shows that there's an increase in police chiefs, one reporting said that in the top largest cities in the United States, there were 12 female police chiefs. And then another report broke it down a little more and said that it's actually increased to about 175, which is 1% of the police chiefs in the United States. And what this article says is police agencies all over the world, all over the US, are having a difficult time hiring those people who reflect people in the communities. And they say that it's important to hire like minorities and females in community because it helps to build trust, helps to build public trust. And do you agree with that? That we need to hire more women in order to build trust into communities, especially minorities in the communities?
Absolutely. If women represent 50% of society, why would they not be a part of any field represented to lead, to serve in every aspect? I think society, including us women, have to get out the mindset that any profession is solely for one gender. Have to get out the mindset that believe that there's a question of, well, why aren't there not more? I signed a commitment. There's a commitment going on for the police project to make a commitment to have, it's called a 30-30 commitment, that we are going to recruit for the year 2033, which is sad, to have more, at least 30% of women in law enforcement on your department, on your profession. So it's going to take some really, really targeted recruiting and really comfortable conversations with women to say, you realize whatever your passion is, if it is service, you can do it in this field. I didn't grow up with law enforcement expectations. I was never exposed to policing. So I really thought I was getting in this field because one, I actually needed to eat. So I needed a job. So I thought the academy was going to be fun. And I was an athlete and I really wanted to be an attorney. And then long and behold, I know God's purpose for me was this because I love my job, because it has enabled me to be the biggest cheerleader, because I love that. I love people, and to lead people into doing the right thing, protecting others, and serving. I love see Michelle has that bakery, has that specialty, and I love to cook. So I literally grew up thinking, I'm gonna be a chef, I'm gonna be a hairstylist, I'm gonna do a lot of different things. But I can do I can do a wedding, I can do a lot, right? And why can't I do it in this field? Trust me, when we do tasks in the agency, there are different levels that deals with leadership, including protecting our community. So recruiting is heavily important. The average percentage of women in law enforcement is about 13%. But the leadership in chiefs is literally, sadly, 2% on average. Ebb and flow. This last year, probably ebbed and flow really crazy. But I think there is a demand right now more than any time. They are looking for leaders because we have a proven track record of resiliency, a proven track record of grace, understanding, and we've come through things. We all have not been perfect, but we've proven that we're not going to stop. There's no obstacle you can put in front of us when we're dedicated, committed, to be successful. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And because we're celebrating Women's History Month, I do want to recognize these women. And this is along the line of how many police chiefs has there been, especially women in, executive level positions. So in 1910, it was Alice Stebbins Wells. She was the first woman as a police chief in the United States in Los Angeles. In 1971 was Margaret Justice, first Black woman to serve as an LA police commissioner. In 1985, it was Penny Harrington, first female police chief for the Portland Police Bureau. In 2019, it's a huge gap there, isn't it? In 2019, Kristen Kootler was the first acting female police commissioner. And then in 2019, Daniel Outlaw became the first Black woman as a police commissioner in Philadelphia. 2021, most recently, Pamela Smith has been named as the first Black woman to lead the United States Park Police Agency. And it says in history. Yeah, in the 230-year history. Most recently, and I thought this was, I wanted to recognize this as well. On this past Wednesday, guys, the Senate voted to confirm Rachel Levine as the nation's Assistant Secretary for Health. Rachel Levine is the first highest ranking openly transgender female. And that was women in US history to be confirmed.
So there have been many, many chiefs. And in fact, when working for the city of Atlanta, Beverly Harvard was a chief, and it was a norm for me. It wasn't, it was my expectation. And then at the same time, we had a sheriff in the same county, Fulton County, Washington, that was a female sheriff. So that became my expectation. It was normalized for me. So that was a benefit to me to see women at that level in major cities doing the work. And along the way across the nation, there have been many female chiefs. So that gap, there are placements, but the expectation, like you said, to have to come and when I first started here in 2017, to continuously ask the question, so what do you think you're going to do as the first female chief? My qualifications got me based off of, if you change my name to my father's name, Eugene Hawkins, I would have still had the top qualifications to do the job, period. But yet you're just asking me about me being a female. I did the work. I've got the experience. I've got the expertise. And I had to work to get to the position. So nothing was ever given to most women in leadership, period.
I just resonate on that because, like they have to ask us, what does it feel like to be the first? Why isn't it that they have to ask men that? What is it to be like to be the first chief of police, right? Or the first.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's a lot of weight too, though. If you think about it, it's a lot of weight because you realize people are looking for you to make a mistake. People are looking for something to happen. Yeah. And whereas they do not give women the grace they have given men across the history, they want women, I heard this phrase, they want women to be one-trick ponies, to solve all the issues. You can't do it. That's not realistic. You give everyone else and put in leadership positions. If you don't give them the resources, if you don't give them support, if you don't back them up with whatever they need to accomplish a goal, then it's an issue. So I think I've received a great deal of support in my position right now, but it's not because I haven't asked for it, and it's not because I keep quiet on it, but yeah, I'll be glad. I was talking to another peer chief, of course. The sisters-in-law is a small group, so we kind of know each other across the nation. And then I was speaking to one, and us having to make a decision whether or not we put another female high-ranking commander in a position, we have to second guess that, whereas men never have to second guess whether it's going to be 3 or 4 men in that top position. If you put 2 or 3 women in that top position, then it's a problem. You're not looking at the qualifications. It's an issue. That's something else to think about, to say, why do we have to tiptoe around that conversation?
You're right. But guess what? We're getting in these positions and are doing great, are doing excellent jobs. I'm sorry, Jennifer, love, go ahead.
So I do think that women lead differently, right? And I do think that it is to the community's benefit to have diversity. And because women lead differently, we look at problems differently, we solve differently, we tend to be more inclusive. It really is, for people out there, you should be encouraging your mayor and your city council, right? If you look at your police department and you look at the demographics of your community, I suspect that whether it is majority African American, a Latina, or whatever it is, there are women there. And there are women within law enforcement in that local community that's probably they have all of the qualifications and have been overlooked. So it is something that I would encourage the folks who are out there listening and participating when you have the opportunity, because we do need to become more involved and engaged, particularly at the local level. That's where everything happens and gets done. And Chief Hawkins is a great example of it. They found her in another police department. There are great women everywhere, but I would love to see more women in these law enforcement positions, because again, I think that women lead differently. And I think that it's almost automatic that women, because we're naturally nurturers, that we can connect. And it's not to say that men can't, we just do it differently. And we tend to be more inclusive. So I love it when I see women in non-traditional roles. And we should encourage our girls, right? I, like you, Chief Hawkins, I never knew about the FBI. As a matter of fact, what my family knew about the FBI was very different and not positive. And they weren't excited about me going into law enforcement. And that's the other part. While it presents us with an opportunity to serve, from a community perspective, it can be a burden, right? Because sometimes I remember, particularly when I was in New Orleans and I would go in and conduct an investigation, and sometimes people would refer to me as a sellout. But then there were other times where I think, and I feel confident that I made a difference in the situation. Was able to calm it down in a different kind of way or connect with the community. So there is absolute value. Men have held these roles forever, so why not try something different?
Lizzie, if I could add something to that for those that are listening, when someone comes to you and asks, how does it feel to be the first? Usually they're looking to validate the decision that they've made and take credit for putting you into that position, as they see putting you in that position. So the question that you should pose to them is not how does it feel to be the first, but let's have a conversation as to why I am the first and what did it take for me to be the first. That's the conversation that we should be having, not how do I feel.
Or the question should be, why am I the first, or why was I the first?
That's it, same, yeah, absolutely. Why am I the first? And what did it take for me to be the first? That's the conversation, not how does it feel to be the first, because they're really trying to validate the decision that was made and to focus on, let's celebrate that you are the first and forget about the journey that you took in order to be the first.
Exactly. Jennifer Love, let's skip to you really quickly. So you were an assistant director for the FBI, which is kind of atypical for a Black female to get up so high. What was that like for you, going through that process?
I think that it is probably, you can take the agency or the company or and Jennifer Rogers' position, you can take the name out, and I think our experiences are very similar. Being in, again, a non-traditional role, you encounter the same things that you encounter. I always talk about this idea of being invisible or being a unicorn. It gets to she's different or she's the only one. Microaggressions, the biases that come with that. And so it is something when you are in the minority, I think there tends to be questions about your capability and your qualifications. I think about when I applied to become an FBI agent, the employment process was relatively easy. I think the challenge and the barrier is that the process itself is open to subjectivity. It's a 3-part process. You have to start with a test, and then you go to an interview, and then you have to pass the polygraph. And in those, there's some subjectivity built into it. And so, you have to be able to, even though they have stated qualifications, I find that the human aspect of me being an FBI agent with 2 other people trying to decide if Jennifer Love should be an FBI agent, and Jennifer Love comes from a place that's very different and unrelatable to the folks who are deciding if I fit in or not. And then you get through that process, and then you get to the FBI Academy, and because now I know that I'm capable, and I know that I can pass the classroom work and the range work and the physical fitness work. But then there's this question of, and even though I pass all of the stated requirements, I still have to fight to stay there because of suitability. Another thing it's very subjective. And so there are, all of us are accustomed to roadblocks and barriers, and always being, you accomplish one, or you get around or over one, and therein lies another. But it is, determination and grit, and this, I belong here. I'm here because I belong here. I got here through hard work, and I did what my male counterparts do, but I just think it is indicative of society. But I think with great women, like the variety of women who are sitting on this panel, being examples to other women that no matter what it is that you want to do, I like to say what Barack Obama says, yes, we can.
And I think that sometimes those experiences get in the way of us believing that we do have what it takes to be in these positions. What do you guys think?
It's interesting. I was looking at some of the syndromes that women suffer from, thinking that you're not good enough. And I was really surprised to hear Michelle Obama and Viola Davis say that, the imposter syndrome. Do I belong here? And quite frankly, I don't know if it was because I grew up in Mississippi and drank well water that I never felt that way. I think part of it is, I grew up in the 60s. My grandparents had a farm, and my grandfather, who only went to the 3rd grade, used to tell me that I could grow up to be anything I wanted to be. If you think about that, a brown girl in the 60s in Mississippi during the civil rights era, where my grandfather didn't always have the right to vote, but he saw me to say, and he made a point of saying, even the stuff that the boys do. And I believed him, right? And so I never suffered from thinking that I wasn't good enough, because like Michelle Obama said, when I get to these places and I look around and I see the other people who are there, I quickly figure out I'm just as smart or smarter as they are.
Yeah. And I think that, the norm used to be, when we have in our mind so much that from history, that women, the expectations that society has on women, I think we internalize that. Most women do internalize the expectations that society have on us, and the expectations that we put on ourselves. And it can sometimes be a struggle, saying I belong here when society says I don't.
So I'll add to that. One, just like Jennifer, I had amazing parents who encouraged, woke us up with mantras, made us believe that we could absolutely do whatever. But they also exposed us to the barriers of knowing that they were going to exist. Now, the question of, at times, do we get in our own heads? I believe, honestly, we do. And it's a reality. I'm the hugest cheerleader for anyone that I know, even more for my children. I have 2 daughters. It is amazing to me and saddened that I've watched them doubt themselves, question themselves. and I'm snapping them, I'm shaking my, are you kidding me? I've been your mother all your life. Why are you doubting yourself? Why are you not knowing that you can do it all? I think it's society,
Yeah.
them having to face that all the time, keep badgering them down, that you have to be strong enough to get through it. And it's through adversity. It's through the hard times. It's through the support that you get that you realize, okay, I got through this one step. Oh, I can keep going. That builds the confidence that each one of us needs to know. And with my faith and with their faith, it's like you're going to have to, at some point, when you don't believe yourself, just believe God. Lean onto that faith and keep moving. As long as you keep moving, you're learning, you're winning. So, yeah, I think society does weigh it down on individuals. Our responsibility, our innate thinking that we're responsible to be the heroes and problem solver for everyone. It's a lot of weight, and we don't give ourselves that much of a break. But I think our biggest barriers are ourselves getting in our own minds and self-doubting ourselves when we know push that aside and keep moving.
You got to push past the fear. I agree with you, Chief Hawkins. You got to push past the fear. It's a feeling, and that we all get. You acknowledge it, even when whether it is walking into a meeting or walking on stage for a speaking engagement, there is a certain ritual that I go through emotionally that will either stop me in my tracks, or if I don't push past that feeling, stop me in my tracks. But if I push past it, then it pushes me towards success, and then I'm able to bless someone else as a result of me pushing past that emotion. But it's oftentimes when we start to overthink what someone else might think, how we should do, how we will perform, or why we won't perform. That's the contemplation that we have, consistently in our heads. And then we spend so much time in that area that we don't focus on, I'm here because I belong. I'm here because I am different. I'm here because I have what it takes. And without me, there's a huge void if I don't enter this room. That's the feeling that you should hold on to. After you accept that is fear, you push past fear, go and brush your shoulders off, girl, and keep moving, and go walk into the room and say, they need me. I am the difference between their ability to go from 0 to 100, or a profit margin of 5% to 100%. And that's why I'm here.
Exactly. I remember I had a mentor say to me, Leslie, when you walk in a room, say to yourself, it's showtime. It's showtime, right? And that would help me every time to kind of, decrease that insecurity, right? That I wasn't good enough. Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jennifer Rogers, you're pretty vocal about your history of substance abuse and how you've overcome. And, at a time in your life, it had taken you to a dark place. How do you get through that? How did you push through that?
I think for everybody, it's different. But for me, I got to a place in my life where I had no desire to live. And I had grown up going to church and believing in God. And at 13 years old, my parents got divorced, which left me with this huge void in my life. And my home life looked completely different from the way that it had for 13 years. And so I began to search for things to fill that void. And I remember right before I probably hit my lowest point, I remember my dad used to say, I'm praying for you. And I was like, don't pray for me. Like, do not pray for me, because the God that I grew up believing in abandoned me at 13 years old. Like, I don't want your prayers. But then I would go and get so high that I would go and I couldn't sleep, and I would sit in bed at night and reach out to this God that I no longer believed in and said, I need you to just take me because I don't want to do this anymore. There was a lot of abuse that went on with my co-defendant, and he blacked my eye from my nose to my head and dislocated my shoulder and put a cigarette out on my face one time. I mean, there were a lot of things that were going on, but I had gotten so used to living in the dysfunction of that. It was normal to me, and I accepted it as normal, and I made excuses for it, and I saw nothing wrong with the behavior. And it was when I literally got to the point I had lost custody of my daughter. And once that happened, I had no desire to live any longer. And I ended up getting a federal indictment. And that is what saved my life. And I remember when I cried out to God and was like, I just need you to take me. He did, but he didn't take me the way I wanted him to. He's like, well, I'm not done with you. Like, all of this wasn't in vain. There's going to be an end to this part of your story, and you're going to use it to help somebody else. And so when I was sitting in Floyd County Jail in Rome, Georgia, I had nothing. I had nothing left. I had lost everything. And I did have a bond, but my condition to my bond was that I had to go home to a safe environment. And my parents were like, absolutely not. We have watched you self-destruct over and over and over. At this point, it had been 5 years, maybe 6, that they had watched this continue on with me and spiral. And they were the only safe environment that I had at that point. So they left me in there. And while I was in there, I was probably 2 weeks in around the time a woman comes in with a church. And to this day, I can remember what she looked like. I don't know her name, but she walks up to me and she says, can I pray for you? She said nothing but, can I pray for you? And I said, yes. So she put her hand on my head. She prayed for me. And when she got done, she looked me directly in my eyes and she said, you will never go back to your addiction again. And she didn't even know that's why I was in there. So in that moment, I knew that I would never go back. It was like I could breathe again for the first time. So I go to the phone and I'm like, Daddy, like I always call Daddy because I knew if I could get him on the phone, somebody was going to get me out. And I was like, I am healed. Please come get me. I am never going to do it again. He's like, you are crazy. We have heard this 100 times. So, they left me in there, but I was in there for 4 months. And during those 4 months, I got intentional about who I wanted to be and how I was going to heal and who I was, because I had to face a lot of things that were inside of me that were my trauma responses to things, in order to, get over that hurdle. And after I had been in there for those 4 months, my mom ended up bonding me out, and I got out, and I was on pretrial for 8.5 or 9 months, and I had completely turned my life around. During that time, I got a job. I was speaking. I was going to all the faith-based programs, and I had a counselor, a drug addictions counselor with the feds. And she, spoke so much life into me at that time that I really needed. And so then my sentencing came, and they still sentenced me to 2 years. And I was supposed to go to a minimum security camp, but I got sent to a maximum security prison. And, I self-surrender, and I don't see daylight from the time that I turned myself in till the day that I walked out of that prison. And I get in there and I'm like, God, like, I'm mad. I'm like, why? Like, I did the steps. I've done everything that I needed to do. Why am I in here? And I have like this weird relationship with God. I go through, instead of like the stages of grief, I go through the stages of anger. I won't talk to him. I mean, I'm just giving him the silent treatment. And then when I get real desperate, I'm like, seriously? And he never really gave me an answer as to why I was in there. But I began to do work on myself, and I went through extensive counseling, and I realized that there were still a lot of unresolved issues that I needed to address within myself in order to get out, in order to be whole, and in order to be able to create an impact in the lives of others.
Yeah, that is such an empowering story. And girl, you knew your mother knew you weren't ready to get out yet.
They all knew.
Yeah. Knew that they were going to save your life if it was going to be the last thing that they did. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, as a psychologist, I've actually worked with substance abuse and recovery. I've given groups and things of that sort. And sometimes it takes that person to be taken out of that environment because you can't do it yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? So sometimes it takes you being removed from that environment. And you still may think it's ready. You're ready to be back, but it takes you to be removed from that environment to get your life back on track. And for you, it sounds like this was a life-altering experience.
It was. And, there were times when I would sit and I was dealing drugs, and I would sit with one of the people that I dealt drugs with, and, we would be high, and I would say, this is going to kill us. It's like, we're either all going to be dead or in prison. But it was just a reality that I had come to accept. Because I had been doing it for so long that I just didn't, it was my life. and it was normal. And like, even now, when I tell my full story to people now, they're like, you have an amazing story. But to me, it's just normal because I lived it. It's your normal. And I think as women, we're so used to downplaying our story, our survival, because we're just expected to do and to survive and to, no matter what, get things done in any realm that you're in, career, at home, it doesn't matter. And so I think that we get so used to playing this role that we're like, oh, it's nothing. You know, it's nothing. It's no big deal.
And also, you know, we do minimize, you know, our experiences, especially when it's the negative experiences. We minimize it because of that, those manufactured emotions such as embarrassment, shame, right?
Mm-hmm.
We minimize. We minimize.
Yeah.
We want people to see what we think they should see.
Exactly. And, you know, I had opened an all-star cheer gym. I got out, I got a job 2 weeks after being released from prison with a national advertising company. And I opened an all-star cheer gym when I think I had been home for maybe 5 years at that point. And no one knew at the gym. They didn't know my story. They didn't know that I was a convicted felon, but I had done all-star cheerleading my whole life and I was very good at it. And my gym was very successful. And my son's father was training this pastor. And he had told me that she had this gift. She could like see things. And he was like, oh, I want to talk to her because I was struggling in my life. And I was talking to her about where I was. And I was like, you know, I know that God has a calling on my life, but I feel like I can't step into it because I've built this very successful business and I can't be honest about who I am with these people because they don't know. And she was like, you're not being honest because you're not being honest because you're afraid you're going to lose your business. She was like, you're not being honest because you're still ashamed. And until you can get on the other side of your shame, God could not use you and everything you went through was in vain. And so I sat on that for like a month and I went on Facebook Live one night and 2 hours live and told my entire story with all of my parents. Everybody heard it and listened to it. And I ended up getting rid of the gym the next season. And it was the best decision that I ever made because I got out of my comfort zone and I walked away from everything that I had created for myself since I had been home from prison, and I started completely over because I had to let go of all the identities that I had created for myself. And I had found great success since I had been home from prison, but it was still toxic. And I had to realize that.
Absolutely. And it's easier to say that what other people are going to think about us. It's harder to say is how we feel about ourselves. And often it's how we feel about ourselves that is that deciding factor as to whether we're going to disclose something, whether we're going to change, make sure we know it's good. Because, and it's hard to say, you know, we're afraid.
Well, and then when I got home, I felt like I had so much to prove to my family, to myself, to the world that I wasn't this person anymore. And so, and I thrived in my career because of that, because I worked so hard, but I just replaced my things. So I became a workaholic, but I'm emotionally detached and I can't connect with my daughter and I can't emotionally connect with anybody. And my relationships are face value because I'm so focused on my success. And so I built great success. But on the other side of that, it was very lonely. I would come home at night and be alone. And have a child in the bedroom next to me and still feel alone. And so, I think it's important, especially when you've been through those type of traumas, to realize that you deserve love too. You deserve a great life too that encompasses everything. You are not your trauma. You are not your mistakes. You overcame them for a reason.
Absolutely. Jennifer Rogers, I want you to talk about your project, and I want you to talk about the National Association of Women's Prison Reform, Rise Up Media, and Ruth Sanctuary. Tell us about that.
So National Association of Women's Prison Reform and Rise Up Media Group are two companies that kind of operate hand in hand with one another. And they are organizations that hire women as they are being released from incarceration. So one of the biggest barriers for women in general is that there just aren't enough programs, number one, for them in prison. And there's not enough job opportunities or career opportunities when they get out that pay women enough for them to reestablish themselves on their feet. And the unfortunate part of that is the majority of these women, they are caretakers, they are mothers, and they can't get out and find meaningful employment that they can afford to live. So I created companies that give them that opportunity. So we are a sales company, and it's kind of a two-part situation. On one side, we do contracts with corporations that are looking for outbound cold call lead generation. I train the women on how to sell over the phone, how to cold call. And so we do, B2B basically, so business to business. So we call small to medium-sized businesses depending on what the product is. We've done loans. We've done voice over IP for a company out of New York. I mean, there's not much that we haven't done. We've done walk-in bathtubs in Texas. So we've done a little bit of everything on that side. And then on the other side, we are an advertising company. So I created a product for real estate agents, and it's a 6x9 mailer card. So on the front, it advertises the real estate agent. So I'll have their picture, their logo, their personal contact information, any wording, trigger words to get buyers and sellers to call them. They're trying to get leads. And then on the back, we sell ads to businesses that want to affiliate with a real estate agent. And so those are like the two different ways that we work, and it's all over the phone. And so they get paid a base salary, uncapped commission. We offer full benefits, 401k, everything. And so it gives them the opportunity to, number one, feel like they're worthy of something better, of a different lifestyle. But number two, work in a room full of women that are just determined to be something different. And, and I'm very hands-on. I am in here with them. I'm pounding the phones with them. I am handling the artwork stuff. Like, I wear all the hats in my company. There's nobody else. And so I handle it all. And I sit in here in a room with them, and, and we talk about our lives. We talk about men. We talk about everything. It's just kind of a family, and we can all relate to one another because we've all had similar experiences and similar traumas. And so, for them to be able to come in, they've become my friends. I don't look at them as my employees. Like, these are people that we're in a group text, and we might be texting at 11:30 at night talking, crap about a man. We're a family, and we're a sisterhood, and that's what I imagined it would be when I created this, these companies. And the newest organization is the Ruth Sanctuary. The Ruth Sanctuary is transitional housing, and it will be a sanctuary of hope for women as they're coming out of incarceration, women that need somewhere to go. Sometimes you've got women that are in prison and they can't get out because they don't have an address to parole out to, or they are getting out and they really don't have anywhere to go. And they know, if I go back to where I came from, I'm going to end up right back in here. And so I might get a call from a family member of theirs. Hey, I've got a sister. She's looking for somewhere to go. She's heard about you or your programs. And so it'll be an 18-month-long program initially, where these women can come and they can learn how to let go of the trauma and recreate who they are. And there's a lot of different, and it's faith-based. So there's a lot of different steps that they'll have to go through. And also they will get employed by my companies. So they will have an opportunity to not only come out with somewhere to live, but to come out and have an opportunity to create a career for themselves.
Excellent. That sounds like an excellent program, because I can imagine that, being released from prison, you're judged. And that's what makes recidivism high, because you come out, can't get a job, and then you go back to criminality.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Michelle, when did your career interests start to align?
I've always wanted to be, I think I was always the advocate, right? I was the one that, the rebel with fighting everybody's cause. And I quickly knew that whatever position I entered into was going to be about public service. And when I moved to the DC area, it was, leaving a small town in Georgia. That's a story in and of itself. But most of us here from either the South or small towns or areas that weren't, as diverse as others. But for me, coming to DC was initially about school. And, I grew up with a background, very religious background. So when I came to DC, it was like, the world is my oyster. Everything is right here in front of me. Things that I had never seen, just experiences that I didn't think I would ever experience. So I kind of got ahead of myself in terms of leaving behind all of the structure that I had grown up with and entering into a world where I was in control of my own life, but the framework of my own life. Well, that quickly led into me, I think it was it 21 when I had my son, and coming from a very religious family at that time, that was just taboo. I mean, we sent you away to go to school. How dare you go off and get pregnant and have a baby? And that just set me on a whole different course, because initially the support that I thought I was going to have, where I was trying to prove that I didn't need that support. So school became, between school and raising my son, it became a juggle. And for me, I'm really all in when it comes to things that I'm focused on. So I began to focus on my career. So I started out in the federal government as a GS4, and moving through the ranks and to becoming a chief of staff for three different individuals: a brigadier general, a retired colonel in the Marines, and U.S. Marshal. So that was quite challenging, given I am a female and I'm in a male-dominated organization where everyone is law enforcement, everyone is retired military. I call it military row. And here I am, this young girl from Georgia, neither military nor law enforcement. How dare I take on the role of a chief of staff of a law enforcement organization to tell these men, what they are going to do and how they're going to meet the agency's objectives. That just was not going to happen, but it did happen. But it was quite a journey for me. There were many sacrifices along the way. My story in terms of my daughter, me traveling, and my daughter suffering from depression. But what I will say is that as we look at every woman on this panel, for those that are focused, that are on Facebook or will look at this later, you gotta have hope. I mean, if you I'm looking at these squares, and it's like Hollywood Square for me right now, because everyone here is so amazing and so special. But if you look at this and you listen to the stories that we're telling, the journey that we each have had in our lives, there is no reason why that doubt should ever rule your day or rule your life. I'm not saying that it won't happen, but having some doubt and some fear is a part of the process. But everyone in this block and this Hollywood Square is evidence that you can master that. It's evidence that the possible is possible, not impossible. So, I just want for anyone that's watching, just take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at the women that are in front of you. Listen to the stories, not only just the successes, but listen to the journey. And place yourself in a position where you believe that you can overcome anything. I had to, given my career, given being a non-law enforcement individual, and being in a law enforcement organization, even to this day. I walk in, I try not to be perceived as the weakest link, surrounded by retired military individuals. I'm surrounded by law enforcement individuals that carry, all of them are armed, and they come in because this is their second career. They come in at 6 a.m. and they leave late at night, and they're on call and available all hours of the day and night. I have a family. I have a husband. I have kids. So for me, I had to make sure that I was competitive, not only on the job, but after hours, mentally, emotionally. It's an obstacle course. We like to say that it's about climbing the ladder. No, there's no ladder. This is an obstacle course. One day it's hurdles. The other it's shot put. The next you're throwing, you're throwing the javelin. So it's so many different things that you have to encounter, so many tools that you have to place in your toolkit in order to be prepared, because you can't prepare when it happens. You have to be prepared before it gets there. So all of those things are really what helps us to shape us to who we are and prepare us for the journeys that we face. So again, I could sit and talk about all of the things that I have done. And but I think that for the most part, the stories that you've heard here are just solid proof that you can overcome, and there's so much that you can do. You were born different, and that's not a negative. That's what makes you so amazing. I say this all the time. You are distinctly different for a reason. Your DNA is like no other person on this earth. And that's what makes you so special, because you are able to walk in a room and do and say things like no other individual. That's your superpower. I'm different. That's what makes me special. That's what makes me so amazing. That's what I own every time I walk into a room, when I say they need me, because there's no one else in this room like me. So don't look at your counterpart and say, well, why can't I? Why don't I? Or I should. What you do is you look at the counterparts and you say, they need me, because I am that amazing. And it's not being cocky, but it's being confident. And it's okay for us to be confident. Some might title it something different, arrogant, or the B word, but don't own any of that. Your passion is your passion, and your truth is your truth. That's what you own. Don't own what anyone else describes you as, and don't own what any burden that they shoulder you with. Your truth is your truth.
The B word is actually beautiful. We established that, and when I was at the National Academy, and now we're beautiful. Yep, that's the B word. That's me.
That's the B word. That's the B word.
And Michelle, you are vocal about not attending college and about school. And let me tell you, most of these agencies, such as FBI and other agencies, they put an emphasis on this is what you have to do. And that's why I didn't become an agent, because I didn't even have a college degree then. And then when I did, I lived vicariously through to Jennifer Love and through to Deborah Evans Smith. I lived through you all. And then by the time I got my degree, I decided I don't even want it. It's not what my future was. So Michelle, how was that for you, going through that process without having a degree?
So I think it's more mentally for me, and because I'm intelligent, because I study continuously. I'm a continual learner. You can't put me in a box and say, well, you had 3 years of college, but you didn't graduate, so therefore you're not experienced. Because what you get from me far exceeds what I would have learned or what I would have received by getting my degree. Not by any stretch of the imagination am I minimizing the importance of the hard work and the accomplishment itself. But what I am saying, for those that are out there that feel like they are not as competitive, especially in 2021, I mean, there's so many opportunities to learn and to have focused learning in terms of something that you really want to do, aside from going to a four-year academic program, getting a four-year degree, or getting your master's. That it's great if that's what you want. But what I'm saying to the women and men, that if you feel like that's your Achilles heel, or that's the thing that's preventing you from succeeding, I gotta tell you, it's not. There are organizations, let's say, well, Tesla. Elon Musk does not even ask you about whether or not you have a degree in terms of working for Tesla. And there are other organizations that are doing the exact same things. Now, if you want to be an attorney, if you want to be a doctor, there are certain scientific fields and specialized fields where, don't tell me you learned it on the internet if you're trying to operate on me, right? So that's not going to cut it. But there are certainly a lot of opportunities for those who don't feel like college is for them. And that's not the way that I felt. It's just the way that my path went. But it has not stopped me. Has it caused pause and me to think? Absolutely, because not only do I walk in a room with that's a male dominated organization with their retired military, they're all gun toters, but the credentials, Do I measure up? Again, I have to take a step back and say, is it about the certification or is it about my ability to contribute? And my ability to contribute far outweighs many of those in the room that have the certifications that they have spent so much time and energy on, and that they use as a mask for their inability to actually do the job. So for me, it mentally, it has been a challenge. I would never say that it has not, because it's a mindset for me in terms of not being able to accomplish or not accomplishing something that I set out to do, and being surrounded by people who have the credentials and other differences that are, that far may outweigh mine in the eyes of others. But so I just say, keep pushing. You keep pushing and own who you are. And if there's an area that you need to strengthen, there's so much opportunity to do that. There's so much opportunity for you to continue to grow and for continual learning in your life.
Excellent, absolutely. And let's turn the tables a little bit and talk about mental health, because all this is we're in the realm of mental health and how we've been impacted with mental health. Mental health is like an umbrella, right? An umbrella, and it can include physiological symptoms, emotional symptoms, psychological symptoms, and in talking about how we feel about our perceptions about us and those many roles that we are in. I call them intersectionalities of being a woman, of being a wife, a partner, a mother, right? A sister, a daughter, right? All these play a role into our psyche and how we interpret ourselves, our expectations that we put on ourselves, expectations that we put on others, and expectations about the world in a larger context, right? And when we think about how that has impacted us, sometimes childhood rearing is enmeshed in that, right? How we've grown up sometimes impact behaviors that we engage in as an adult or as an adolescent, right? So Chief Hawkins, I want to go to you really quickly. You identify as a multicultural woman. How has that impacted mental health growing up, especially being in the U.S.?
So absolutely. Let me share. So my mother is Panamanian and my father is Black. And my mother didn't speak a lick of English. My father didn't speak a lick of Spanish, but that wasn't a problem because they had 4 kids. So they communicated somehow. But either way, growing up, she was young. I was her 3rd child, and she was 20 when she had me. We grew up in a Black community and didn't realize that speaking 2 languages was a bad thing in that community because of culture. So we had to, when we went to school, really had to tell my mom to stop speaking to us in Spanish so we can be accepted in the community. But then even in that aspect, trying to have an image of I'm just Black or showing that until I go to Panama and visit my grandmother on the other side. And then, of course, we're all loved. But growing up, it was challenging because my paternal grandparents did not like the fact that my mom was Panamanian. So she actually treated her grandkids awful. We were treated awful by my grandparents, but we lived through that. We had a strong family network. Neither one of my parents graduated high school. So all of their kids were first generation going to college, and because they thought, that's what you should do. That's the best track. So for the majority of my, what I identify with, was a Black community, and having the only ability, probably a lot of forms, only check one box because I can't check 2, and try to press down the Panamanian side of me. I had to get to the adult aspect and realize, why am I doing that? Why am I not, even though I love I'm half Panamanian. That's plain and simple. So now I choose and check when there's only one box, the Hispanic box. When I have one option, I'll choose that, because when people see me, they're only going to see of color, which they're going to treat me brown or black, one of the two. It's still going to treat me differently. But it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure because you get questioned. Are you black enough? Are you Latino? Are you really not? You're really not a minority. It's like, really? So, but I also grew up with a father that knew how different we were. And he would say, it was crazy. He said, you all are just French, Canadian, Cuban, San Blanc, Indian, American, Negro. He would just put it all in there. It's sad that I can say that phrase and it sound, y'all were like, what did she say? Because he would say that all to us to let us accept we have a lot of things that are about us and to be strong in acknowledging that. But getting through that, so I remember I said my mom didn't speak English, but my mom actually retired. Look, if this goes national, it'd be funny. She retired from IBM and Nationwide as a systems analyst supervisor with no education. Because at that time, she worked from being data entry to learning what she had to do with an extremely heavy accent. So she was criticized. She was blocked at every moment until one person gave her opportunity. So along the way, she got training, she got education in that field, and no one knew she never had those are positions that you have to have secondary degrees for nowadays. No one has any clue or any idea. She probably dropped out of school in the 9th grade. No idea, but she retired from that. So, and my father, the same thing, very smart and intelligent, but had blocks put up along the way. So right now, the barriers or the stresses, my mom was the first one because my father owned a business, a bar business, and she was working for Nationwide. So she was maintaining everything. My mom got cancer at the age of 50, and I was so upset. And I was upset with my dad because I'm like, she is stressed out and you made her be like this. But then in 2008, I'm working, being a mom, being a commander at one agency. And my system, I literally go to the doctor because I start having like cysts come up all over the place. Things come up and I couldn't figure out what was going on because in my mind, I was good. I literally went to the doctor's appointment one day and they were like, we have to admit you right now. I'm like, what? I was in uniform, drove to in a patrol car. They were like, no, we can't release you. I was like, what do you mean? They said, your body is shutting down right now. And I'm like, no, it's not. And literally, I was in there for 3 days. We had an infection disease doctor. They were analyzing. My body was shutting down. And it was because of stress. I really had to acknowledge there is no clue. There was no explanation. They still had no idea. And I know it was the stress that I was putting on myself that I had to realize I need to take a step back. I need to really think about what I'm doing and the choices I'm making. And am I stretching my whole body to capacity, thinking I'm going to keep going? Well, your body's a survivalist. Your body's going to shut down before you can do it itself. And it goes in the form of stress and it comes out. So the importance of taking care of yourself is crucial for me. Being able to vent, talk to someone, being able to realize this is not healthy and taking measures to make sure you have your oxygen mask on first so that you can make sure others have it on as well as a leader.
Gina, I can ask you a question, and this is for any of the ladies. So you went through that period where, and we all do, where you begin to take on things and you really don't, you just kind of keep moving like we do. We just, like I said earlier, you brush your shoulders off and you keep moving. What are some of the things that you do now, or would you tell the younger version of you when you were going through some of those things in terms of investing in yourself and self-care?
Absolutely. First of all, you need to have people that you trust where you can vent and they pull your coattail. My best friends, the best one, I went through a divorce and was in a parking lot screaming because I didn't believe this was happening. She's on the other end screaming, saying, get it together. Have you lost your mind? He's not an idol. Shake it off. So, and then it was like, oh, okay, you're right. And then truly thinking about what I eat, focusing on physical health, the intake of that, exercise. Like right now, I got another friend that I would watch her walk, and it'd be on social media. I'm like, you are getting up at what time in the morning? And it was an excuse from, she literally gets up at 4:30 in the morning. And I finally had to make the decision to say, what excuse do I have? So I get up at 4:30 in the morning with her, and it's amazing to walk. And we walk. It's not an easy walk. It's like a race walk. But the goal is, come on, we're going to do this for an hour and a half. And we are walking in the dark, in the rain. But you know what? It's a completion. We know it's healthy for us. It's stress reliever. It's fellowship. We keeping ourselves accountable. Then I also take, especially since COVID, I probably take about 16 vitamin pills a day. It's crazy. I can name them all, but I take that because I'm like, okay, I need a supplement. Because sometimes I might get busy and can't eat, which I know is bad. I try to get water. I try to limit sugar. But if those are the countermeasures that I have to first make sure my body is physically, and be honest with myself to say, I have to take these. I can't take it for granted. Because my grandmother just passed away, bless her heart, in the end of February, 102 years old. It's in my genes. I want to get to those genes. I want to do that. And I got to figure out what I can do to get to that longevity. But I've got to take ownership in participating in what that looks like and being honest with myself with that.
Yeah. You know, Chief, I'm so glad you brought up stress, because oftentimes with stress, stress is the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And what happens is, the parasympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. When we're faced with stressful events, our body releases hormones into our bodies. And then so we go into fight or flight. And when you become so stressful, our bodies can't go back down to its natural resting state, which is the sympathetic nervous system. It takes you back down to its normal resting state. And when we become chronically fatigued or chronically stressed, it potentially results in gastrointestinal problems, heart problems, hypertension, which is the silent killer, they call it, right? So a lot of different medical conditions stress can result in, even sometimes death. So self-care is important when we can get ourselves to a point where we can engage in relaxation and exercises and things of that sort, or whatever, walking, if walking works, or if exercise works, or if just sitting down listening to music works to help your body return to its natural resting state, then that's excellent. So I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to talk about a little bit and I'll go to Jennifer Rogers, because you're the first one I'm saying. with regards to mental health, with your experiences, how has mental health impacted you and your children? You often talked about, mental health in your home and how you've overcome certain adversities, and how you've, especially when it disrupts like family relationships, right? How has that impacted you?
When I first came home and I was working in the advertising company that I was at, and I was there for 8.5 years, it was a toxic environment. It was a stressful environment, and I made a lot of money there, but I went home defeated every single day, just exhausted from the day. And so, in that environment, people were drinking alcohol throughout the day, and in the evenings, like, you had to have a drink to like wash off the day, and smoking cigarettes, and it's a sales environment. And I would literally come home and I wouldn't want to talk to anybody. And then it was a phone sales job, so I was literally talking, and I was managing anywhere from 15 to 25 reps, and they're calling me down and like screaming and cussing me out every day, like telling me all kinds of like things that aren't legal to say, but they say care. And so when I would go home, there was no decompression of that. Like, and that's once I walked away from that environment, I realized like this like toxic for me. Like you could see the aging that it was causing. Like I have literally reverse aged since I quit working there. Like, and then I changed my diet, and I quit eating meat and I stopped drinking all the time and I quit smoking and I just literally, I drink a gallon of water a day. I work out 5 times a week. And for me, if I don't do those things, I will be a lunatic. Like I will just snap in a heartbeat. Like, and I think that it's so easy to get sucked into our patterns that we're living these lives. It's like the rat race or the wheel. You're on it every day and you don't even realize that you've become negative, or that like everything that you're consuming every single day, it's either feeding you positively or negatively. And so for me, it made a huge impact on my relationship, on my ability to connect, with my daughter, especially during that time period. Because once I got custody of her back, she hated me. She hated me. Like we went to therapy, therapists quit on us. They're like, there is nothing that we could do for y'all. And there wasn't. I mean, it was a hard time. And so I did what I knew how to do very well. And I went back into survival mode and I parented her from survival mode. Did you eat? Is your homework done? It's bath time. It's time to go to bed. Like that was our relationship and we couldn't connect outside of that. And it took a very, devastating situation to fix that between she and I. And that kind of took all of the walls down and the veil off, and we were finally able to connect with each other. But it's been a hard road.
Yeah. And in putting your relationship back together, I would imagine there's still some struggles with experiences as a woman or experiences with children, or how do you overcome existing struggles?
Now we don't have any. If you would have met us July 12th, it would have been a totally different response. July 12th, we didn't get along, and it was like, and I think mom and daughter teenage relationships are difficult anyways. But when you add a lifetime of regret and not being able to understand one another, on top of that, it was like our backs were always to one another. And then, she had a ruptured brain aneurysm. And when that happened, our entire lives changed. And for 6 weeks, I watched her fight for her life. And I really believed that she was going to die, and she did as well. And so during that time frame, we went through so many different emotions, and we had to face one another for the first time. And so with that, we healed it, and it was an intensive 6 weeks. It was 6 weeks of not knowing what the next minute would hold. And when you're faced with that situation, I remember saying to my mom on FaceTime one night, and I was just crying. And I said, if she dies, if I had to sit in here by myself and watch her die before I ever really got to know her, I will die with her. It was devastating. And it was devastating because nothing could stop me. I was always moving. I was always busying myself, because that allowed me to not have time to have to sit with myself in the quiet and face things that I didn't want to face within me. And so I was the queen of busying myself. Even when I was working at that toxic advertising company, I would join 4 network marketing companies. And so I was always working. I was always doing something. And then COVID happens, and that wasn't enough to sit me down, even though it shut my companies down momentarily and we were all in isolation. That wasn't enough. And so then my daughter's brain ruptures, or her aneurysm ruptures. And that was the thing. I had no choice. But then I had just started my company back up. And so now I'm sitting in a hospital ICU room, not able to go outside. It felt like prison all over again. I'm watching the child that I lost to that lifestyle fight for her life. My company has only been back up for a week. I've got new people I never even trained. I've got customers calling me complaining on the phone. I've got a rental in Florida that I'm dealing with, and I've got tenants in the rental calling because a door came off the hinge. I'm like, I was about to lose my shit. And excuse my French, but I was like, if one more person calls me today, I'm quitting everything. Like, I'm giving the company up. I don't care. Like, I've had it. But I had to remember how to find my peace. Because when I was in prison in a solitary confinement for 3 weeks for something that I didn't do, and I thought I would lose my mind then, I found peace in that situation. And it took me back to that moment because I told myself then, if I can find peace in this moment, there is nothing that I cannot do in life. There is nothing that I cannot overcome. And there is nothing or no one that can stop me from going where I'm meant to go. So I think you have to have a mindset and an attitude to say, you know what, and a realization to recognize when you're about to fall into an old pattern or into a negative way of thinking, because we all do it, and I still do it to this day, but I catch it quicker because I recognize when it's coming.
Sometimes we have triggers. Sometimes there are triggers to experiences, especially traumatic experiences and experiences that are connected to substance use, the history of substance use. There are and that's what I heard you say. There were times that you had triggers and you thought you were going back to where, or it placed you back into a place that you were before, right?
Yeah, mentally. And, it's funny that you bring up triggers because I had a conversation with someone the other day. I was about when people are high. And I was like, you have two people that are high and this person is experiencing one thing and this person is experiencing something totally different, but they did the same drug. Why are they experiencing two different things? Is it their trauma that it's coming from? What is triggering that? We had an entire in-depth conversation about it. Like, where does that come from? And, I think especially with someone that's been their lifestyle, when you come out of that, you might be past the addiction. And I don't identify as an addict. When that woman told me that I was no longer addicted to methamphetamines, I was no longer addicted. You will never hear me stand in front of anybody and say, I am an addict. I am in recovery. No, I am absolutely not in recovery. I am recovered. I am healed. I am delivered. And I will never be that person again. But let me tell you what it was like being that person.
But this shows you how our experiences often become a part of our identities.
Mm-hmm.
We are, right? And and when it becomes a part of our identities, that's when triggers come up.
Right.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing. Jennifer Love, and coming to you, you also spoke about a traumatic event that took place after you were at the FBI. That was, it could have either, broke you down and kept you down, but you mustered up strength, right? And through your story to get back on your feet and move forward.
So it's interesting for the folks who are out there, the four of us never met before. And if you've listened, it's really been a blessing for me to hear everybody else's story, because everyone that you meet has a story. And, you may look at me and you read my bio, and I tell God all the time, I'm thankful that I don't look like what I've been through. And so I had this unbelievable career in the FBI. I retired in July 2012 to a standing room only. I was amazed after 25 years that people thought enough of me, interestingly enough, to show up. So I landed a dream job in New York City, right? Had avoided New York City my entire FBI career. And I had this unbelievable job with a company that owned Madison Square Garden. So I really got to experience all the things that New York had to offer for free. And I moved there. I had my kids, my adult kids were involved in picking the perfect place, helping me furnish it. And then on November the 11th of 2012, I had a habit. I'm a creature of habit. So I had gone the weekend before. My son was playing football in Maryland. And I had gone the weekend before with my daughter and my sister, and we had gone to his game. I came back on Sunday. And this was after Superstorm Sandy. So I had an FBI agent who was living with me because she had been displaced. But it was Veterans Weekend. So after when it was time for us to come back, she said, I'm just going to catch the train on Monday since I'm off work, and I'll be back on Tuesday. So I drove up Sunday, watched my 3 football games, NFL, had my pizza, glass of wine, and I went to bed, only to be awakened in the middle of the night by someone standing in my bedroom with a knife. And something you said, your fight or flight kicked in, my law enforcement, and immediately the only thing that I knew to do was to fight for my life, because immediately there was a sense that I knew that he was there to kill me. And as terrified as I was also calm. Long story short, we got into a terrible fight. He broke my nose, he broke my eye socket, he slit my throat. He beat me up, he threw me downstairs, he sexually assaulted me. The FBI agent who had just retired months before then, he left me for dead. And lucky for me, I knew my house really well. And when we were fighting, I did the only thing that I knew how to do. And thank God for praying grandmothers. And thank God for the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. Because when it became clear to me that I couldn't fight anymore, and by the way, he asphyxiated me with zip ties to the point of he ruptured all of the blood vessels in my eyes, he bound my feet. I started to pray out loud, because I remembered that the old ladies used to say that if you get into a position, just call on the name of Jesus. And I grew up in church too, and so I am a very faith-based person. And so I started praying, and I said, I really thought I was going to die. And I said to myself, man, this is how it's going to end for me. What are my kids going to think? FBI agent, what are people going to say? This is how I'm going to die. I just retired. I haven't even had 3 pension checks. I mean, all sorts of things go through your head, as crazy as it is. And I was like, so Lord, forgive me of my sins and receive my spirit, because I was convinced at that point I was going to die. But that girl that my grandfather said that you could be anything you wanted to be said, but I don't want to die, God. I still have stuff to do. And my grandson needs me, and my son and my kid. I don't want to die. I said, but I don't want to suffer either. And immediately I passed out. I tell people all the time that God answered every prayer that I prayed that night, because I thought I was going to die. I said I didn't want to die, but I don't want to suffer. And so I passed out. I was awakened literally by a sensation that someone blew a puff of air on my cheek to wake me up, because he had thrown me down the stairs. And what he was going to do, I found out during trial, he was going to take my body and dump me someplace, because he saw my FBI retired credentials. And he figured out that, he was in real trouble. And so when I woke up, he was standing over me in the dark with a knife. When he went upstairs, I rolled over and I crawled to the door and I ran to the neighbor's house. And I didn't know all the things that were wrong with me at that particular time. I didn't know that he had slit my throat, and I had a zip tie around my neck. And so I immediately went to the first door, and I thought, oh my God, if he comes out, he had a knife, he's going to finish me. So I started running down the street, and I saw a light on, and a lady was going upstairs and with a dog. And I went to her and I started hitting on the door and begging her to let me in. And she wouldn't. She was afraid. And so I was saying, lady, somebody has tried to kill me. Please let me in. He's going to come and kill me. And there was a man upstairs, and I could hear him yelling, say, don't open the door for her. Don't let her in. And I was like, lady, I'm going to die. And I was so terrified. I balled my fists up because there was a side light. And I had decided that I was going to punch a hole in the side light and open her door myself to get in. And then I thought, but they might shoot me. And so I said, and he was like, she's not going to open the door. So I looked around, and it was garbage day. I tried to get in this big black garbage can, but I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get myself in. I was too weak, but I couldn't figure it out. So I sat up against the door, and I was like, I got to make him open the door. So I started hitting my head up against the door, I said, I'm going to create so much noise that somebody is going to open something. And I finally heard him say, I'm not going to let you in. She's not going to open the door, but we call the police. And I was like, thank God. Almost instantaneously, I could see the police lights and I could hear the siren. And I tried to get up, but I couldn't. And so I was trying to yell out and I couldn't speak. So finally, all of a sudden, I saw this flashlight. And the police officer shined the flashlight on me, and he started screaming like he had seen the worst thing in his life. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I must be really hurt, because if he was screaming like a woman, right? And so he came over to me, and I looked up and I said, I was trying to say I can't breathe because the zip tie was so tight. And so he went into his pocket and he tried to cut it off, and it was too tight. And he called for an ambulance, and within less than 40 seconds, there was an ambulance there. Remember, God is in the plan. And so the ambulance come, they get the zip tie off, and now I'm in the ambulance, and I'm going in and out of consciousness. They're asking me my name. They're saying I'm dying. And, they were saying her blood pressure is this. And I was trying to say, but I'm a runner. No, I'm not dying. It's my normal blood pressure. Don't say that. I can hear you guys. And I hear over the radio that they are following a suspicious white Mercedes. And I said to him, I have one. And he said, do you know the license plates? And I said, I said, no, but Virginia tags, because I had gone to the New York DMV 3 times to get a New York driver's license. And because my passport didn't match my driver's license, because I had an official FBI passport for all sorts of reasons, I couldn't get my license plate changed. Long story short, he had stolen my car. And so the officer who had gotten in the car with me said, it doesn't have Virginia plates. We're in New York. And he said, yes, follow that car. That's the victim's car. They get into a high-speed chase. He crashes my car into a house, and they find him. I get to the hospital because there were 2 things that I told him. I told him what my name was, where I worked, and that I was a retired FBI agent. And so when I got there, there was this unbelievable police presence. And the head of the New York FBI office, she had just finished working for me, right? God again. And so when they got me there, I had to have a blood transfusion because he had nicked my jugular. And so they said I was dying, and the doctor, and they got into an argument. And so they said, she said she's barely alive. And he says, we need for her to identify this person, or try to, before she dies. They literally did a dying, Chief, you know what this is. They did a dying declaration in the emergency room. I survived. And so while I had an encounter with evil, God answered all of my prayers. And so I live my life now seeking. And I said, you kept me alive for a reason. What is my purpose? What is it that you would have me do? And I have always, like the ladies, all the ladies to me here that are on this panel, have been in service to people. And that is the kind of thing that I've always done. And so again, I don't care what happens to you, ladies and people who are listening. You can overcome anything with God, but in the African-American community, mental health is counseling is frowned upon. But for that, I don't know where I would be. So that's my story.
Thank you so much for sharing your story of will and faith and recovery. And recovery is because you're here now and you can tell that story. And when you tell your story, you see that it doesn't impact you as it once did, right? I would imagine that when it first took place, you couldn't even mutter it out of your mouth without falling apart and breaking down, right? So what therapy does is takes you through that process. And oftentimes when I think about substance use, Jennifer Rogers said this earlier, the 5 stages of grief. I think that as women, when we are sexually abused, we lose something, right? We grieve that process. So that process, the 5 stages of grief by Kubler and Ross is, denial. We go through denial that it had ever take place. Denial, anger, we become angry. Bargaining, we bargain. Lord, please, help us, and I promise I'll do this. We bargain. Depression, and then acceptance. And the last stage is acceptance. Once you've gone through that process, those stages, and you can go back and forth through stages, right? You can think that you're at recovery and I'm better. And then next thing you know, something will happen and you'll go right back to anger, right back to being angry, right? So, that process walks you through that whole thing. And then you're able to actually talk about it in a way that, and another important thing is support system. That's really huge. huge. The support system, because our support systems that are there to listen to us, right? Not to judge us, but to listen to us and help us through those steps and processes is important as well. And it sounds like, Jennifer, that you actually went through a great process, a therapeutic process with support systems, your family and others, and you're here today to tell this story.
Can I say something else?
Yeah.
Because I think this is really important.
Yeah.
It used to, Deborah Evans can say this, because I had a reputation, but I don't want anyone listening to think that this was not what it was. The hardest thing that I have ever had to do. And I didn't do it alone, but it was hard. I became anorexic.
Yeah.
I developed the acid reflux. They found out months later. Talk about triggers and going back and forth. I remember one day I couldn't raise my arm, and I was like, "What is that about?" And then I looked at my neck and my spine. They determined in April that when he slit my throat, he cut my spinal accessory nerve. And so, I mean, my shoulder was coming out of place. There were all sorts of things that triggered, and it was a toggling. I would go back and forth. And so I don't, yes, we can heal and recover, but you have to put the work in. And it is really painful. I remember when she told me, because I knew that there would be homework, right? I knew that there would be something. And so she said, okay, your homework tonight is to go sit out in the dark, in the backyard by yourself for 30 minutes. And I said, lady, you have lost your mind. And I said, 30 minutes? I can't be outside 1 minute. How am I? I mean, I would have a physiological reaction to being in the dark. And she said, listen, and she explained the whole trauma thing. You're safe, that this happened one in a gazillion times. The family is going to be inside, but they can't come rescue you. So at dinner that night, I said to the mother, I said, I have homework tonight. And she said, okay, can we help? I said, there's something that you have to do and you have to promise me. She's like, okay, the whole family. I said, I have to sit in the dark for 30 minutes and you can't come and rescue me. She's like, who said that? And I said, that's my home. She goes, give me the number. I'm calling that lady because she's seen me when it was getting dark and how I would be. And I remember I was sweating. I had my iPhone. I was counting I didn't think I would be able to do it. And then there came a point in time, because then, of course, then you have to do it all the time. And then there came a point in time I didn't even know I liked the Milky Way and the solar system. And I finally went to her and I was like, I mean, what's the, and I realized I was no longer afraid of the dark. And then she said, good. So now what you have to do, because I never went back to that place. I never returned. I gave away all of my furniture. I gave away everything. And so she said, you have to go back to the townhouse, and I want you to sit either in the driveway or across the street in the dark for 30 minutes. And I was like, no, I could do the first thing because I knew the folks were inside, and if something bad happened, I said, I can't do it. And she said, just try. She said, if you can't, and I remember driving, and I remember my heart racing. The closer that I got, I thought I was having a heart attack, literally. And when I pulled up on the street, I just stopped and I made a U-turn and I went to the stop sign. And I remember that the guy said that the reason why they were able to respond is because the ambulance was at the corner and he was pumping gas. So I turned around and I came back and I was able to do it. So I don't want anybody to think that this was a linear process. It was not. And I'm sure Jennifer Rogers, you can say the same thing. You go, one day you think you're good, and then you try to go on the subway, so it's not a linear process, but you have to be willing to expose all of yourself, and you just have to. But the one thing that I remembered is I was like, God, I want to be well. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I want to be well.
Absolutely. And what you're talking about is prolonged exposure. And prolonged exposure has components in there called gradual exposure, right? There's many forms of exposure. Exposure can be just you sitting here telling your story, but there's many forms, to look at pictures, in vivo exposure. You can look at pictures of the street or the address or wherever it took place, or then you can gradually go there. And the idea behind it is the more and more you face your fears or your traumas or memories, etc., you become desensitized, right? You become desensitized, and that's what it sounds like. And again, you're going to have triggers. You can still go backwards. You know, something can happen. You can have triggers vicariously by watching the news, by watching an assault take place on TV. So vicariously, you can be traumatized. Does anybody want to weigh in on Jennifer's story?
I think Jennifer said something, Leslie, that was critical for me. I think I encountered in my own journey with my daughter. Jennifer said that, you know, in our community, it's frowned upon to seek professional help, and it is. Especially, I grew up from a very religious background. I mean, if God can't do it, then it can be done, right? You don't go asking for no extra, because all we need to do is lay hands on it, and we just need to pray, and it's done. Because it's so true. So, you know, in my quest for to become a senior executive, you know, in the Federal Protective Service and Department of Homeland Security, when I talked about me being not wanting to be perceived as the weakest link, I did that at a cost. There was a huge sacrifice for that. So, you know, missing the PTA meetings and all of those moments, you know, in my pursuit of that position, and in my, you know, trying not to be perceived as the weakest link, there was a lot that I left on the table. And I didn't realize it too much later that I had a daughter that was suffering from depression. And, you know, for a family and in the Black community, how dare you suffer from depression, right? And for a kid, it's like a teenager, oh, they just want attention. That's what, you know, the world was saying, and those around me, well, they just want attention, they're teenagers. But it was not that. So having the job that I had, the travel, you know, being in the SCS, candidate development program, and being away for 6 months at a time, you know, after Hurricane Rita and Katrina, I was deployed to Baton Rouge. Here I am, a non-gun toter. You know, my twins were barely a year old, and I'm deployed to Baton Rouge for 6 or 7 months. All those things came at a cost, but I felt that I had to go out on those opportunities to be able to progress in my career. Little did I know that whatever was for position myself to get it. It didn't mean sacrificing the world. It just meant sacrificing things that would get in my way. And my family wasn't one of those things. But to the point of our community and not, or feeling ashamed, or not feeling like you can seek you know, professional help. If you have the ability or at least the need to go to the doctor after you broke your arm, then mentally, if you are broken, emotionally, if you are broken, then mental health is a part of that healing process. So we went through several different therapists and psychologists because none were good enough. But I will say that in your pursuit of trying to find the right therapist, you're interviewing people. You don't have to settle for what was given to you, or it's a relationship. And we found it with my daughter in trying to find the right therapist. It wasn't that one of the therapists were bad. It just wasn't a right fit for my daughter at that time. But we ultimately ended up in the right spot. But there were some very challenging times for me and my family. There were times when I would sleep outside of her door, you know, at night, in fear that she wasn't going to be there the next day. I'd get up, get dressed, drive my 45 minutes to work, go in my office, cry my eyes out, brush my shoulders off yet again, because that's what we do, walk into the next conference room, hold my head up and have a meeting like nothing ever happened. And then I would have my breakdown moments again, brush my shoulders off and come back. So what I didn't realize is that while we were seeking help for her, that I too needed some support. Because, and it wasn't until last year that I realized, as I looked at my career, as I looked at, you know, my family, the sacrifices made, the trauma that we've endured, the changes that have occurred in my life, that I have held on to all of that and looked for help for everyone else without looking for help for myself. So I'm not afraid or ashamed to say that, because it has helped me as an individual to understand that, you know, part of what I was doing was masking. And part of what I was doing was holding on to things so that I didn't have to look at the vulnerabilities or the challenges or the gaps that existed in my own life. And I know as career women, as executives, as the chief of police, as the director of FBI, as all of these things, people hold us to a certain standard. And as Black women, they hold us to a certain standard because we're supposed to be strong, and we are, but we're not supposed to shake or break or even give the inclination that we are not strong enough to handle the tasks that are in front of us. But we do have to understand that we have to take a step back, invest in ourselves and our own sanity in order to be able to, to put the mask on first, thing, in order to be able to continue to move forward. So for every woman out there that's in pursuit of their career or building their own business, and you seem like you have it, you want to at least portray that you have it all together, I say that you do have an opportunity to get some assistance and some help that's outside of your immediate circle. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because that's what helps to make you stronger. The mind is as healthy as the medicine that you feed it. Your soul is as healthy as the things that you feed it. But you got to not only surround yourself with people who are going to hold you accountable and help you grow, but you got to feed yourself those things that are going to make you stronger, so that you can accept the challenges, at least be able to deal with the challenges that you face, but at least, also accept the opportunities that are in front of you. So therapy for me, for my family, was a huge part of our healing altogether. It was many years later that I decided to get, therapy or help for myself. But it wasn't until I stepped back and said, well, everybody else seems to be okay now, but what's going on in my own world? And that's why I say, well, you've helped with the healing of everyone else, but you didn't realize that you were broken in the process too. So thank you, Jenna, for that, because that is critical.
And, I want to say that we often mask, we wear masks and then we take those masks off when we go home. But we wear masks in front of everyone else because, again, those expectations of us. And we can't let them see us with the mask off. And that's women in general. With children, I'll talk about children for a second. Children, they process things differently and they react differently. They respond differently. They don't respond like us. We're vocal. We can express our feelings and emotions. I can give you an emotions wheel and tell you how you feel. You can go through those emotions and say, I feel embarrassed. I feel guilt. I feel fear. I feel happy, sad, etc. But with children, they internalize more.
Yep. And
when they internalize more, especially when there's deep wounds, right? Oftentimes we talk about children, especially when we talk about cutting and self-mutilating behaviors. When you cut, it's to mask the pain that is so severe. You can't do anything else but to hurt yourself. And what happens, that behavior becomes maintained. It becomes a circle because it serves that purpose. So guess what? They keep cutting or they keep harming themselves because it temporarily takes away the hard and the stuff that they're feeling that doesn't feel good. It's the same with trauma. We develop behaviors that are maintained. They serve a purpose. We stay in a house because we feel safer in the house. Might not be a healthy behavior, right? But we stay in the house because we feel safe, and that behavior serves a purpose. But then once you go through that process, you realize, guess what? I can live again. I can spend time with my family and friends. That was an isolated incident. It only happened once. So what's the evidence to suggest that it's going to happen again? Right? It was only one. You go through this process, even with children, being able to understand that you don't have to harm yourself to be heard or to feel, so that other people can feel your pain, right? Being able to be support systems. And, like I said, me and Michelle, I've walked through you with that process. I've met you at the hospital many nights, and I think, and I want to ask you, one of the hardest things for me, and Michelle, I imagine it was difficult for you too, is being at the hospital with your child and not being able to have the right resources then and there. So not knowing where your child is going to go, right? Not knowing what bed, because there's not beds available, right? Where your child is going to go. And thinking about that and thinking about the resources that are out there for children to help them cope with experiences as well.
That's a good point, Leslie. That's an excellent point, because you were there. I tell you, I think that's part of some of the fear that exists within our community, because it's the unknown. You don't know what to expect, and sometimes you run into professionals that just because they simply have the titles or the certifications, that you expect that they are going to have all of the answers to all of your problems. And it's not always a good match. And it's not, again, like I said, that there may not be a good doctor, but you have to find what works for you.
We're going to wind down, and again, these stories tell us that we have experiences that have become a part of our lives. They don't identify who we are, but they are a part of our identity. And I'm going to repeat that. They don't identify who we are, but they are a part of our identity, which means that, and that's what therapy helps you understand. You can't run away from it. Many times situations happen when you try to run, and that's what sets us up for failure. We realize that we can't run from it because it's always there, but we live how to live with it, and live how to adjust and create more positive and appropriate behaviors. We've heard from 4 amazing women this evening who discussed personal experiences of trauma, substance abuse, divorce, and who disclosed their experiences of how mental health has impacted them personally and professionally. The stories imitate perseverance, strength, motivation, and resilience that kept them going. The goal of this segment was to empower and motivate women and let you all know that your professional options are limitless. I believe that as women, we are innately resilient, and once we recognize and accept that we are powerful, unique beings, we can create platforms that lead us to great success.